amazing. You know how much I care about you and enjoy our conversations. At the end of this video, you and I are going to talk about something that we're going to be doing in the next few weeks, I hope, if not soon,
Yes.
or a few weeks is fine. I'll learn to be patient. Um, so we'll get into that today. You and I are going to talk about what I've been talking about all week, which is culture at organizations. And so we've had a couple of people that have talked about their role in leading their individual organizations. I've already talked about how you as an individual can try to change culture within your department, your group, or even just make your work life better by changing your own management of culture when you can't control everything. Sometimes
Hmm.
we work for bosses or environments that just aren't great. And so, what I'd like you and I to do today is to talk about both ends of it. But if you could bring some perspective on what you've seen, not only in running your own business and being part of organizations, but as in your role as consultant to companies, some things that you see work well, don't work well, trends that you're seeing, all those types of things. We've got about 15 or 20 minutes to chat it through. I've thrown at you at least three topics: works well, doesn't, and then what you see happening. So I'll let you run with whatever you want to start with. How's that?
Oh man, you're going to open it up?
Is that too heavy?
Okay.
All right,
Maybe. I have so many ideas on this
I know you
topic.
do. All right, I'll narrow it down for you. In your role, because a big part of what you do is help organizations essentially get themselves together, right? You're working with
Yes.
CEOs, heads of HR. There's a term that I always forget. You got to help me out with it. The branding name that I keep forgetting.
Employer branding.
Employer branding,
Hmm.
which coming from the marketing side, always I found a little humorous. We talked about this. However, I get it.
Yeah,
And it's really creating help the HR department's helping create that brand within the organization too, not just how the customers perceive things.
absolutely.
So what do you see in your experiences helping organizations as an outside consultant that most organizations get right? Is there anything?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there is. Um, I would say the best things that organizations get right is flexibility and not being afraid to try something. So, what I mean by that is a lot of companies are scared to try the newest trend, right? Of greater maternity paternity leave or more work from home or more flexibility. And what they do, especially when they're experiencing conflict or challenges within the organization, is they tend to go the opposite direction. So they tighten down, they control, they want to control, they want to control. And you tease me a lot because I used like relationships. I also use parenting as
I know.
a mode of talking through and relating to these things because it's something that most people can relate to. But it's almost like when you have a child and the more you try and control the child instead of giving them choices, the more they rebel. It's the same thing with human beings as adults, right? Probably even more so. So companies that do this well are the ones that hire great talent and trust their talent to get their job done. And
Sure.
if they're not delivering, then they hold them accountable to that, right? But it's not about being afraid to provide flexibility, being afraid to try new benefits and perks, or even giving the autonomy to the leader to grant that based on the individual needs of the employee. It's okay that it's not a one size fits all. And it's okay that maybe, Sally over here has more flexibility and more work from home time because she works better when she works from home. Whereas Jim over here, does better when he's in person and collaborating. And so maybe Jim doesn't work great with 3 days work from home per week, right? But if they're both delivering and they're delivering in their own way and doing well, then that's for the manager to manage. And that's for them to have the autonomy and power to say, this is what works for best for my people. And I think the best thing an organization can do, and I've seen this done well, is like I said, basically providing the flexibility, providing the autonomy to the managers and the people, and relinquishing the control, knowing that you're making the right choice up front in hiring the people and then managing them up.
Isn't it more about our world is changed right now? I've seen this metamorphosis. I'm a little bit older than you, maybe a couple of years older than you. You didn't even laugh at that.
I mean,
Um, so what I've seen, um, I'm not trying to say I'm really crazy corny, but 20 years ago when I was at a startup, I realized that the team that worked for me had just set deliverables. They had certain tasks that had to get done by a certain time. We were in client management, client services stuff that were project management things. There was a certain way that we did things, a discovery phase, a development phase, and along the way there were points where you had to communicate status, and then the project ended and you went on to another one. It was very account services, ad agency-esque stuff, development stuff. And so I realized that the example I'm giving is perhaps unique to some of that. However, I try to apply it still to this day, and where I'm going with this is simply this. Isn't it the output that's more important? And so if I wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning, crank for 2 hours, go for a 3-hour bike ride, crank for another 5, and then work at 10 o'clock at night, as long as I'm not impacting you because maybe you as the manager go, I'm going to bed at 10. So don't call me at 11 if you have a question, right? As long as we communicate and agree to when we're going to meet to get status and updates, then my attitude, and you know my language, so I got to say this, who gives a shit if I'm sitting at a desk next to you or in Costa Rica typing stuff out? The output is what you should be measuring.
Absolutely.
Until we work in an environment where we can see output. And what I used to always try to do with my teams was tell them, I don't care where you work, I don't care when you work. The project to do is on this date. 48 hours before, it better be close, because that's about how much time we need to fix up if there's an emergency. I would prefer 72 hours for questions. So just put those dates on your calendar.
Right.
If you're one of those people that can sit down and in 3 hours crank out work, great. The value of my dollar that I'm spending to have you on my team has nothing to do with the hours you work and the quality of the product you produce.
Definitely.
That's the value of the salary. Am I wrong on that?
Absolutely. And today we can track so many things with data that it's easier than ever to measure output. And so, as long as people are delivering, doesn't matter how it gets done. And maybe there's parameters around that, right? Like maybe you're in client services, and so there needs to be a number of days that you're on site, you're working, you're in front of the client with that FaceTime. So set parameters where appropriate, but trying to live by the value of 30 years ago, where it's whoever's to the office earliest and gets home the latest, they're the promotable ones. That's actually not good time management, right? If you have to be at the office for 10 hours a day to get your work done, either your workload is too high or you're not managing your time well. And so in a digital age,
or you don't have anything else to do in your life. And I'm going to say something now from a mindset perspective. Get out and smell some flowers. Go for a walk. Yeah. Ellie, you know this about me personally, and the group's going to laugh, but you know this because you and I talk a lot. You know I am a hard driver. I go all day long. I enjoy it. It gives me validation. At the same time, when it's nicer out, if you and I were done right now at 3 o'clock, I'm getting on my mountain bike and I'm cranking for 2.5 hours. That actually makes me more productive when I come back, because then my brain clears up. I have ideas. Yeah. There's a book. I love talking to you. You know that. So I know we get off topic. But you mentioned something earlier, and I want to try to find it because I've got my Kindle here. And I want to find a book that I've been reading that I'm curious to know your point on this and see if you see this at organizations. So, and I'm sorry for pointing. I don't know why I keep pointing at you. It's so obnoxious. There's this book that you may have heard me talk about. It is about when we go to work. I'm trying to find it. It's in The Power of When is the name of the book. Okay, by a guy named Dr. Michael Bruce. And he's a PhD, not an MD. And he had people coming to him who were struggling with, he's a social scientist, so they were struggling with going to work, people about to lose their jobs, similar to kind of the coaching stuff that I do. And this one woman in particular, the anecdote he tells in the story, was getting to work at 8 o'clock because her office was an 8 to 4 place. Mm-hmm. And she was struggling. She had early morning meetings, and it wasn't until around 11 o'clock that she started to kick ass. But her boss said, we're tired of you taking forever to get rolling. We're all here ready to go. You can't do this. So he did some studies on her and asked her some basic questions. When are you most productive? When do you do certain things, et cetera, and so on. He wrote a book called The Power of When, which says this is his theory, that there's 4 types of people. Super early risers who are damn productive then. People who are in the middle of the day. Yeah. Me? Yeah, but ask
you and your freaking 4 a.m.
Yeah, 3:30, 4 o'clock though in the afternoon. Come see what I'm like.
Yeah.
I'm out. I have to on the weekends when I go on dates. when I go on my dates. On the weekends, I have to take a nap or else I'm cashed at dinner. Well, that's because I get up early. So he did this
Yeah.
whole analysis, and then he went back to her and said, ask your boss if you can start work at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because he really studied her. And there's a genealogy, there's a biology to it in the same way that owls are nocturnal and wolves are nocturnal and other animals are not and they're early risers. So is that one of your theories that you're talking about here? The power of when. I'd highly recommend everyone read the book and take his test.
Yeah, totally. Because that's been my experience, right? I'm similar to you in recognizing when I'm most productive, but I'm opposite in that I do not do well in the morning. In
Right.
fact, I'm the person that kicks in around 9:30, 10 a.m. when I've woken up slowly, I've had my coffee, and then I'm cranking for like a solid 4 or 5 hours, and then I crash, and then I have a full-blown like second win around 7 p.m.
Yeah.
From 7 to midnight. Sometimes I'm pulling out work, no problem. And I have no problem doing work late at night if I have the flexibility. And so it took me starting my own business. That was one of the most exciting things for me was like, now I can work when I genuinely work best, right? I don't have to be within the confines of a work day. I can actually be productive when I'm most productive. And when I'm not, I can spend it with my son. I can clean up my house and watch a
Whatever it is,
video
you
in the
create.
background, like whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
When you say that organizations have more success when they recognize these type of work dynamics, again, I understand and appreciate if you're an ER doctor, right? You have hours that you have to
Sure.
be there. If you're a UPS driver, I get it. You can't, if your shift is 2 a.m. to noon, that's your
Of course.
shift,
Or you're working
right?
in a call center, right? And you have to be there during
I
this time.
understand,
Sure.
certainly. And that's what's funny is if you want to be a UPS driver, and you know you're more nocturnal, then set your schedule.
Yeah,
Don't apply for early morning if you can.
of
When you
course.
say organizations have success, can you define that in some way? It doesn't have to be purely quantifiable at this point in this discussion, but talk to me about when you say the organizations that learn and understand these types of things, what's the reward that they get from that typically?
So we know for a fact that organizations that have great talent that's producing, it immediately impacts their bottom line. So you are excelling in your business, you're more profitable, you have less turnover and retention and wasted productivity, time, and cost on those things. So the best thing an organization can do is find the greatest talent for whatever they need, right? Because one person who's a solid candidate in one role might not be in another, might not be in a different culture. So finding the right top talent for you and then nurturing them to be the best that they can be. And to do that, you need to be able to leverage their organic strengths and what you hired them for to begin with, if you're smart in that hiring process. And then you need to allow them to do what they do best in the ways they do it best. And that means promoting and encouraging them to work on projects they're great at the times that they're most productive, right? And in what they need to feel fulfilled and energized to put out A plus work. Then you're immediately impacting your customers better, your business
Yeah.
better. Everything is improving because of it.
Do you see in those circumstances? Because I would guess, when again, I'm gonna bring up me as some radical kind of guy here. I do feel I was way ahead of the curve for the last 20 years because I had a group of 35 people reporting to me at one point, and we were modifying our offices and trying to decide literally the physical space. And I went, you know what? Let me get with my team first because I've got an idea. Because we were literally trying to figure out how many cubes we needed and how many
Sure.
private offices we need to create for people to have conference calls and meetings. And I went, you know what? I bet, because we were in also a collaborative environment, I said I had an idea because I just want to have a desk with laptops and extensions where people could just sit and work and talk and come as they go and come and go as they please rather. And so what I was met with at first with a little bit of resentment, and this is the question I'm asking of you. What I got together with the team was I said, how do you want to work? I need you here one day a week. Let's pick a time when everyone has to come in because I have status that we have to go through and I'll need to meet with you individually. But how do you want to work? Now, some people wanted to get up in the morning and come to an office and make that drive. They felt that that routine made them more productive. They felt that they were so. How do you manage then, or did you encounter resentment? Because early on, I kind of did. I had some people that were working from home and others that were coming in and went, well, God, it used to be really lively, a lot of people here. Now there's not as many people. So, you're meeting the individual needs, but sometimes individual needs may be, like you say, collaboration. So how do you work through some of that organizational shift? Do you have ideas for that or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I experienced that actually with my previous team. They were the company that had really tight restrictions around work from home policy, for example. And they started just surveying the employees and getting constant feedback, more flexibility, more flexibility, more flexibility. And they listened. So they did the right thing, right? They listened. They started experimenting with different things. They've now moved to the point of, on a side note, unlimited vacation, which is something I championed before I left. And I'm so proud of them
I
because it's
love that.
great. Yes. But at the time, it was a big change for people because it was a very organized schedule and we're used to having everyone in the office. And so those that thrived with other people being around them start to feel like they were being robbed of that teammate environment
That's
as
exactly
people
it.
are coming and going from the office.
Right.
So I think it's about the team coming together and figuring out what that balance looks like. We're all adults, right? So it's not that mind blowing to bring everyone together and recognize that we can all kind of speak up for what our individual needs are and be aware of those things and compromise and work through what that looks like. So I know a challenge was for my direct report, me being gone and working from home 2 to 3 days a week. So I started making an effort of alternating those weeks. So I'd come in, most days of the week and maybe take one day, and then the next week I do two, and the next one I do one. And I would also make sure that I would text her and be in communication, have video chats as needed. So she felt like I was still present and aware because she was an office person. And so she felt like she lost communication touch with me being gone and not physically present. And as a team, we kind of all work through that with our direct reports, with each other. Like, what does that look like for us? And a team is its own dynamic, just like two people in a relationship is its own dynamic. And you have to be able to talk and work through and compromise on what that looks like and how that works for everybody.
Yeah. Awesome. When we look at organizations, and boy, I'm going to go down an HR path. Given your background, you may punch me right through the screen. Are some of these issues, uh, for lack of any other way to say it, ageists? Meaning, a lot of people my age that I've encountered, and I think you and I talked about this specifically yesterday. I tend to think a lot younger than my age and my experience level.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of if you and I had a huge thriving business, someone wants to take off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to go watch their son or daughter play a sporting event, get out there, go do it. My goal is that we get stuff done and whatever that means, if that makes you happier, because I like picking up and like I said, getting on my mountain bike. So do you think is the challenge that there is a wave of younger employees who know how to balance all this stuff? And is it the older employees like myself who are so used to the 9 to 5? Remember, you ready for this one to scare the crap out of you? And I don't know if you've ever experienced this. My first job at a major corporation was Allstate. It was always my goal to be at a big company and work my way up to EVP. Is the dumbest thing at the time. I thought it meant everything. At 26 years old, I was promoted to a director level. I thought it was the shit. You realize when you became that level, you had to wear your jacket to the cafeteria. So you went to work in suits and ties. You could take
Yeah.
your jacket off and hang it on in your modified cube or modified office. But if you were director level, you had to wear, director and above, you had to wear your jacket to the cafeteria.
Wow.
Right. And so there's still a generation of people that grew up with that structure,
Sure.
right? When I was your age, where when I was that age, I thought it was the dumbest effing thing on the planet. Why does that
Yeah.
matter? Do you see generational conflicts taking place around the workplace, or am I
Yes.
too base or too stereotypical on that?
No, I think stereotypes are there for a reason. Doesn't mean they're always true, but I think there is a broad scope of, you know, baby boomers or people that have been in the workforce longer and are used to that 9 to 5 equaling work ethic that do sometimes struggle with the balance of the younger generation and things being more remote, right? Because the younger generation is much more technically savvy and they've grown up with just different values. They've grown up with the values of altruism and wanting to have work-life balance and wanting to have flexibility. They value that so much above everything else. So that's really what's brought about this shift in culture of what companies need to look like now. So I don't want to neglect the power of the generational factor. But at the same time, what I also see is the younger generation doesn't know how to communicate as effectively. And so because of all the technology and text messaging and things that have not required face-to-face communication or maybe more advanced and thorough communication, results in a disconnect between the younger generation and the older generation where, managers might not require that you be at the office all the time, but they still want to know what's going on. And so that's where I see a disconnect from the younger generation, and where they contribute to some of these challenges is there's people that want to know what's going on and be in the loop and be communicated with throughout the process of flexibility. And it's finding the balance of someone being able to be delivering on their own terms, but also communicating effectively with their manager and their teammates about what's going on, what their needs are, where things are at. Here's the status, here's the update. So that's where I think both need to meet in the middle. Does that make sense?
It does 100%, because I have 3 people now that do work for me that are younger than 28 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And those dynamics I find really interesting. What I've found as a boss works, and I'd love to tell me if you think I'm doing this wrong or not. What I've found that works is I try to do 3 things all the time. I try to make sure I understand them as people. I want to know their interests and their likes. Now, sometimes they're not always willing to share that stuff. That's a vulnerability gap that not many people want to cross. You know me well enough. I tend to put it out there, so I try to make them as comfortable as possible. Recently, in fact, just connected with someone over a shared interest of Chris Stapleton. There's a young woman that works for me, really never told me about how her day was and all this other kind of stuff, because she felt that's her stuff. And out of nowhere, she heard me listening to Chris Stapleton and goes, I didn't know you liked him. And now we found a way to bond over something.
Sure.
That's the first thing, is I try to treat them as people. The second thing is I truly try to understand what do they like to do at work, because I'm going to give you more of that. And then the third thing that I do is absolutely set explicit rules, regulations, guidelines of how we're going to work. Meaning, working for me, I said to these 2 new employees that started, and I'm telling you this story to see what your feedback would be. And you could tell me, I'm not so sure if I like it or not. I don't need you to agree with me. I always say that to you.
Oh, I won't if I don't.
I sat with these 2 employees and said, I can be challenging to work with, because I'm going to give you not a leash, roam of the entire field. You can run wherever you want to go. When I whistle, come back.
Yeah.
So if you're uncomfortable with looking at this wide open space and you want a leash, let's work on that.
Yeah.
But my attitude is, you graduated college, you're paying your bills, you've got your own apartment, you drive your own car. I can put a task in front of you and run with it. And I will always be here if you have questions. But my goal is to let you run with things, and then let's figure out where you want to go after that. So early on, if you want to call me every day because you're not sure about things, but my ultimate goal is for you just to hum. Hell, my ultimate goal, I always tell them, is for you to never be here at all, living in Italy somewhere, getting all of your work done in an hour and still making the same amount of money you're making. So recap, I want to know what they are as people. I want to understand their interests at work and what they like to do, so I can make sure I can tailor that, because I'm not going to hire someone if they don't like doing that stuff. And then the third thing is, I let them know this is how the work environment's going to be, and this is how you're going to manage it and own it with me. Yeah. I'm going to set the leadership course. I don't need to be out there managing you and making sure every time you pick up the rifle, you've got it in your shoulder correctly. If you need that training, we'll figure that out.
Sure.
So what do you think of that does that happen often? Do you see that happening in your industry?
Not as much as it should. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes leaders make, is not setting expectations.
But why doesn't it happen? That's what I don't understand. Do you know why?
I don't know. I think, I don't know that people are self-aware enough to realize that their expectations can differ greatly from one leader to the next. And so, and the communication thing again, right? Like it's almost like we expect people to read our minds. And we need to explicitly communicate what we're looking for, what our expectations are, and what has room for negotiation, what doesn't, and also take the time to get to know our employees. So I would say you're doing that really well, because in my opinion, those are the two things, right? This generation particularly, and the next generation. So I work with kids in colleges a lot, and the feedback as I get constantly is like, oh, Alex really seems to care about me. She's very direct, she's very firm, but she really seems to care about me. That matters so much to them. Like, this new generation feels, I think, very disconnected from all the technology, and they want to know that somebody cares about them. And so being able to say up front, like, I care about you, I care about your success, I want to get to know you, I want to get to know your needs, your strengths, your interests, so that I can best leverage you. But here are my strengths and my preferences and my shortcomings, right? And this is my expectation. I know if I'm someone that struggles with control a little bit and prefers to be in the know, I want to know if you're running 5 minutes late. I want you to tell me, right? Or if I'm someone that's more laissez-faire and I'm like, hey, like, I don't really care when you show up to the office. Just show up. Or if you're not going to show up, let me know. Or, hey, I'm more of a 15-minute person. Like, if you're going to be more than 15 minutes late, please just let me know, right? So setting the expectation so you can help people succeed, because that's the reality. Like, it differs from person to person. Just the way that you need to manage people differently, you need to understand that you're different as a manager and need to set the expectations clearly for those people of how they succeed with you as their leader, and that you're open to dialogue if they need more from you. Yeah. Hey, here's how I manage. If that doesn't work for you and you need more structure, just let me know. Like, we're learning as we go. Let's keep in communication. And I've had to work backwards with people, right? Sure. I was too hands off. Yes. And I let them know I'm available for questions, but they need more structure. So I have to provide that for them.
Yeah. Let's reverse it. I only have about 5 minutes left with you. So I want to try to crank through the last topic. I think one of the hardest things to do is to be on the other end of this. So when I went through transition to be a manager, it was really tough and intimidating, because some of the people I was managing then were people that were my level. So there's that awkwardness. But once my career started rolling, and particularly as I've gained more experience, like anything, it's easy to be, for me at least, to think how we just described as a manager, okay? Someone that leads teams. I think there's a challenge when you've got a boss that doesn't communicate well. You've got an environment where maybe there's inappropriate conversation that you don't like. There are two options you typically have in those situations. If you don't need the job, right? If you know, I can't quit. The option is, I'm going to find someplace else. Or if you really like parts of it and you just wish some things were fixed, you can try to change some aspects of culture. I think that's a much harder task.
It is.
So, totally putting you on the spot, because I literally had someone that I'm working with right now that said, help me because my boss is a pain in the ass. Always comes in, steps on my team, tells my team what to do. I don't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see what your recommendations are now. Let's flip it. How do you manage up?
So I've been in the scenario. And I've managed change within a culture from the bottom up, and it is hard. It is really hard. Really hard. I think the first thing you need to do is have courage, right? Because it means having frank and tough conversations with people that have power over your job. And so you have to want it badly enough that you're willing to be courageous and stick to your guns. I've had to tell bosses, like, hey, this is not okay. I don't agree with this, right? And you can do it tactfully, but in the case of your client, it might be sitting down, having a frank conversation with her, saying, you know what, I respect you a lot. I respect your opinion, but I can't manage effectively if you're coming in and undermining me. And so how can I still get your feedback in a way that's not in front of my team? And I can disseminate the information to them if it's something that's really important to you, or a change that you want to have made, and it's coming from me, so that we're not confusing ranks here, right? So managing up, starting by being brave. I think the second is
I got to interrupt you real quick. I love the being brave thing, because, and not just because you said it, I think it all starts there. If you are brave with what you're encountering, the risk you run is that your boss is going to go, get over it, toughen up, a whole bunch of the stereotypical bullshit. You at least have expressed how you feel, and that can't be debated by somebody.
Yes,
So I
definitely.
love that first one. Sorry, be brave
Yeah.
and started going on. I love
Yeah.
it.
The second one, I think, is getting people around you that can advocate with you, right?
Interesting.
It's really hard to do it alone. And so you want to align yourself with other people that are passionate about the change that you want to see. For example, if it's diversity, right? Like find other people that are willing to put in the time and the effort and do the legwork. And then when you have that, bring it to the higher ups, the CEOs, and say, hey, look, this is a change we've been noticing. Here's where it's negatively impacting people, right? And we want to make sure that we take part in making it better. Will you let us do this? Like, let us run with this and we'll keep bringing it back to you. We'll get you involved wherever you can because it's important for you to be on board. But, we're happy to do the legwork to make this happen. Get permission, right? So you have your advocates and then keep coming back and doing a pulse check with leadership, saying, hey, this is what we've done. We're really excited. This is the feedback we're getting. When leadership starts hearing that it's gaining traction and it's having positive results, it's kind of hard for them to
To
shut it
not
down.
listen. Right.
Yeah. And
It's hard to not listen.
there's always going to be the leader that's the asshole, right?
Of
It's just
course.
like so
Of
stuck in their ego. They're like, no. But most leadership teams will not. And if you can't get it by one leader, like have mentorships and relationships with other leaders who are influencers within the organization and get them to advocate for you on a higher level.
Yeah.
That way it's, you're kind of playing off this politics and dynamics.
Stereotypical grassroots thing that you got to build it up. It's just a lot of work.
Absolutely. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, you know how much I appreciate you. You know how much I appreciate your time. I've got 60 seconds left. I want to talk to people about what you and I are starting to do.
Yes.
Yes? Do you want to talk about it or do you want me to talk about it?
I mean, we can both talk about it.
You go ahead and dive in and I'll add.
Okay. So you and I are, I have no words. You and I are kicking off. I was going to say starting off, kicking off, and almost turned to like shitting off.
Oh, that works.
You and I are kicking off a podcast, probably bi-weekly, just talking about things like this: how to manage your career, how to manage culture, how to manage organizations from the bottom up and the top down. So both an employee and leadership perspective, and just bringing different topics to the table. So I'm excited about that. I have plenty to say on the matter, hence why I told you not to give me free reign at the beginning of this. What would you like to chime in on that?
You know how much I appreciate you, and you and I have known each other for quite a while right now and getting to know each other more. I love the topic. I think it combines both of our skill sets. Huge advocate of how mindset and balance applies to work. And I know you're a huge advocate of work and then the balance of the mindset. And so our two efforts, I think, work really well. I know I got so much positive feedback about you being on the show previously. And I think just over time, we've realized there's got to be something we can do. So the podcast, so everyone knows, will really be focusing on corporate culture. We can dive into a few individual things, like if you're looking for job change and stuff like that. Primarily, it's helping organizations build that great internal brand, right?
Yes.
To build their own environment where people enjoy coming to work. And so it's going to start with a podcast. We hope you and I can morph that into a few other things.
Definitely.
For now, we're going to get it off the ground with a podcast. Look for that. We hope maybe in a month or so. We're going to do a lot of homework in advance of that, but I'm super happy to be doing something like this with you. And I guarantee we're going to get followers, and maybe even people watching this now can come up with a name for the podcast.
Yeah, we still need to name it. So if you have ideas, let us know.
Any ideas?
As You're long more as creative than we are.
Yeah, and all of my friends will rip on me and call it something stupid about with my name, like Jackass Sucks or something. That's what my friends will say. But anyway, I'm excited about that. I totally appreciate your time. You got a bolt because I know you got stuff to do today. Yes. I really like the frosted background thing that we did. That's kind of cool.
I know, right?
It's a really neat treat. I like it. Though I think your house looks kind of cool behind you, so I want to see it one day.
Oh, thank you. This is my fireplace with handmade pottery from like 100 years ago.
Nice.
Ceramics, yeah.
That's very cool. All right, you rock. Oh, I always do this. You have to do it with me, right? And because it's my show, but on our show, we have to do this. But you got to do the piece. You got to do the peace and rock on thing.
Peace. That took me a second to put together.
Rock on. There you go.
I didn't want to give you the wrong fingers here.
Oh, you're the best. Okay, I will talk to you later. Have an awesome weekend. Happy Valentine's Day to you and your husband.
Too. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye. I'm going to stop.